Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about how car dealers don't exactly think that there is actually a car market crash. I'm going to explain their logic in today's video, and well, I'll let you guys make your own conclusion as to what's actually happening. Before we get into this video though, as always, you're going to save time and money the next time you purchase a car. Link to my car buying guide in the description down below. And if you want to see more content just like this, then I recommend you subscribe because I post videos every single day. Let's get into it. Now, you'd think that something that directly impacts dealers, such as the car market pretty much crashing, would be something that they'd be very aware of and that they would frankly be the first ones to raise the alarm bells about. But there's a number of reasons as to why they aren't doing this and frankly why they will never do this. First of which is pretty self-explanatory, and that's the fact that this completely goes against the whole sales narrative. Because if a dealership admits there's something wrong in the market, that the market is declining at a rapid rate, well, that's going to push away potential customers, right? They want to continue the narrative of cars are in short supply. If you don't buy now, you're probably not going to be able to get that car, especially at the deal that we're offering right now. And so they're going to continue with the narrative that makes the most sense for their business to attract the most amount of customers. And again, it's just logical. That being said, though, they will, tweak the narrative here and there to make sure that they are still as profitable as they can be. So on one side, when they're selling you a car, they're going to say, hey, you got to buy this car now or else it's going to sell. But if you're trading in a car within this transaction, they're going to say, oh, well, the floor has completely collapsed underneath car values. And so we can't give you nearly as much money for your trading as we could before. And so it's kind of like this weird dual narrative that completely clashes with itself that they are putting out to customers, which again, it doesn't necessarily make any sort of logical sense. But if you look at it from a dealership's perspective, it makes all the sense because it means that they will have to pay people, or not have to, but they can pay people less money for their trade-ins and they can sell people their inventory for more money. Another reason why dealers don't think that there's anything wrong is because their inventory levels are still historically low. Yes, they are increasing day by day, and dealerships do see this, but they see this as a positive, not as a negative, because if you look at the dealership model, they're used to having a ton of vehicles on the lot. And so when the average car dealership has, a relatively empty lot still, they feel like, okay, well, supply and demand still messed up. There's not enough supply and too much demand. And so until they're in a situation where their lots are literally overflowing with cars, they don't really have any reason to discount vehicles, and we'll kind of touch base on that again towards the end of the video. But all you need to know for this little segment is that because dealer inventories are still relatively low compared to historical standards, they don't think that there's anything that is amiss within the car world. Something else that dealers are seeing is that a lot of them are having their allocation cut. Now, this is not because they're doing anything wrong in the eyes of their respective manufacturers. It's because their manufacturers are saying that, well, we can't build as many vehicles as we were building in the past, and so we're going to have to cut your allocation. And so again, from the dealership point of view, they're going, oh, wait a second, we still have inventory levels that are historically low. And now my manufacturer is telling me that I'm not going to get nearly as many cars this year as I thought. And so the whole supply demand thing is still going to be pretty crazy into the foreseeable future. So the car market crashing, that's not a thing. Until the manufacturers pick up with production, there is not going to be any sort of crash. The next big reason as to why dealers don't think that there's anything wrong is because overall profitability is still really strong. Now, it is decreasing month by month on average, but most dealers represent a manufacturer that has at least, one or two models that is still hot within today's market, meaning that they can still charge market premiums on at least a few models within their lineup. And so that kind of overinflates the overall profit numbers. But then the vehicles that aren't in as much demand, well, they're starting to make deals on those vehicles and they're starting to sell them in slightly higher volume amounts. And so you have a situation where most car dealers are starting to sell more cars than they were compared to the same time last year, although they're making less money per car. And so it kind of evens out to where they're making about the same amount of money overall, or maybe a little bit less, but they're still making so much more money compared to what they were making prior to the pandemic that they're just happy with the situation overall. Even though, some incomes might be decreasing, if they're still sky high, right? Who's going to complain? Something else that dealers are seeing is more foot traffic, especially when you compare it to the last couple of years, because, well, there was no reason for people to go into dealerships the last couple of years because there were no cars to look at. But now that inventories are starting to build up slightly, people are visiting dealers again, and those dealers are able to convert some of that foot traffic into car deals. And so again, it's making them feel like the industry is moving in a positive direction because, well, I actually have cars that I can sell people on today, and I have people that are actually visiting my store, whereas before they were just calling in and submitting internet leads. And so again, it feels like things are going into a positive direction. So are car dealers correct in saying that there's nothing happening with the market? There is no market crash, that everything is fine? And here's the deal, not exactly. Like I said at the beginning of the video, it makes no sense for any car dealer to admit that anything is wrong with the market, because then that would push buyers from buying a car right now. But there are some creative things that I'm seeing happen with car dealers to kind of navigate this whole situation. And I think that it could potentially work, but it also could potentially backfire. And here's what they're doing. So right now, we have a situation where wholesale values have declined by a massive amount over the last 12 months, and especially over the last 6 months. And so you have a lot of car dealers that have used car inventory that they are underwater with, as in they own the cars for more money than what they are actually worth. And so that's why we haven't seen a collapse in retail values, because dealers are businesses and businesses don't like to lose money. Car dealers don't like to lose money. So they're holding on to this inventory and it's just becoming older and older, but they're okay with that because they're still doing car deals with their new age inventory. Dealers are still getting cars traded in, especially if they're new car dealers, because people are buying new cars still and they're trading in their cars, and they're buying these cars at these lower wholesale amounts. And so they're able to make some profit on these cars. And that is basically what's paying for all of these other old age units. And so it's a situation where dealers might be able to like perfectly navigate out of this and, you know, somehow come out unscathed. Now, like I said, new car dealers have a much better chance of doing this than used car dealers, but this is also why these dealers say that there's nothing happening with the market, because they're kind of getting around it in a way. However, what I do want to say is that retail values will ultimately fall. They just aren't going to fall anytime soon, because of this whole inventory finagling that dealers are doing. But at the end of the day, dealers will only want to have cars for so long, and so eventually they're going to have to take some L's on cars. They just don't want to do that today. And the reason they don't want to do that today is, well, they're still extremely profitable. And most dealers are pretty flush with cash right now because of how much money they made over the last few years. So they can afford to keep this inventory for longer. And so we're kind of at a standstill right now, where what the market is naturally trying to do is fall because demand is dying and these prices need to come down because cars are overinflated because of what happened over the last couple of years. But the prices aren't going to fall until these dealers start lowering these retail values, but they don't have any incentive to lower those retail values just yet. But it will come in the future. As for my personal guess on when this is going to happen, I think that it's probably going to be another at least 3 to 6 months before we see any sort of substantial decrease with retail values on cars, because that's enough time where dealers will basically be able to, you know, get rid of enough of their inventory and get new inventory at these lower wholesale values to where they can start taking losses on the old age inventory that they paid a little bit too much for. But again, it's going to be kind of one of those things where it's like a slow trade-off, where they're slowly getting new cars at lower values and they're getting rid of the old cars at the higher values. And yeah, it's a mess, but I'm sure they're going to end up figuring it out. And what that'll ultimately lead to for all of us is that we will finally have cheaper cars. With that being said, that's going to sum things up for today's video. And again, if you want to see more content just like this, then I recommend you subscribe, because I post these videos every single day. I'll see you.